Have you ever thought, is this just me when struggling to stay organized, start tasks, or manage time? For those of us over 50, these challenges might not be just aging. They could be ADHD hiding in plain sight for decades. I'm Jamie Shapiro, host of Grandma Has ADHD, and I'm building a community where your experiences matter. Whether you're diagnosed, questioning, or simply curious, you're not alone. Our Facebook group is filled with vibrant, understanding people over 50 who share their stories, strategies, and yes, even their struggles, with plenty of laughter along the way. Ready to find your people? Join our growing Grandma Has ADHD Facebook community. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone, because ADHD doesn't have an age limit and neither does understanding yourself better. Together, we're changing the conversation about ADHD after 50. Come be part of the story. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Grandma Has ADHD. I am joined today by Judith Rosen, who is a licensed clinical social worker in private practice in New York City. I actually met her at the International ADHD Conference. We were sitting next to each other in one of the only 2 sessions on aging and ADHD, and I've been very vocal about the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of conversation around aging and ADHD, but we had a really nice conversation, and Judith is one of my favorite kind of guests because she both works in the ADHD space and has ADHD. She actually was not diagnosed until she was 36, which to me is an early diagnosis, Judith, because I wasn't diagnosed until my mid-40s. She left a successful career in new media, and then returned to school not once but twice to first get a degree in a bachelor's in psychology and then a master's in social work at the age of 53 from NYU. You are impressive, which I find is also very common in ADHD, my ADHD community. She believes that her diagnosis and being treated for ADHD was a key to her academic success in her 40s and 50s. So welcome to Grandma Has ADHD.
Thank you so much for having me, Jamie. I'm glad to be here.
Right. So, before I dive in, I always like to find out about people's ADHD journeys and maybe a little bit about your family and how ADHD shows up.
Absolutely. Well, I was listening to some of your earlier podcasts and you've spoken about this before. Absolutely. There's a definite genetic component to this. It is a heritable disease disorder, I should say more correctly. And it runs in my family for sure, but I was born in 1959 and it wasn't something that was talked about, especially in girls. So I didn't even know it existed during my school years. I would have had no way of knowing, but I started smoking when I was 14 years old. I started smoking cigarettes. I was a dancer, and most of us ballerinas wanted to stay skinny, skinny, skinny. So it was better to smoke than eat. And what I didn't know all those years that I smoked until my 30s was that I was self-medicating with nicotine. Think about it. Nicotine is a stimulant, right? And what is the kind of medication that's normally prescribed for ADHD?
Stimulants.
Hello. Yes.
Right.
So when I quit smoking at 36, my life basically started to fall apart. I was making a lot of mistakes at work and I had creditors calling me, not because I couldn't pay, but because I forgot to pay my bills and so on and so forth. And at 1:00 in the morning, I was watching the repeat episode of Oprah and she had an episode about ADHD.
Wow.
Oh my God.
I missed it because I used to love Oprah. I'd come home from college every day at 4:00 and watch Oprah. And, I learned a lot, but I did not see that episode because I would have maybe had that light bulb moment for myself.
Oh, I've not been able to find the episode since. I don't know if I'm looking for the right dates or not, but all I know is that I watched it, I listened to it, and I started crying. Wow. I was like, oh my God, that's me. Wait, I've got a thing. There's a thing I've got. And if there's a thing, maybe I can get help for it. And I then went on the web and I surfed the web, was what we called it back in those days, and just read everything I could find about it and looked for a doctor that was examining people for it and evaluating people. And I found someone, I made an appointment the very next morning because, ADHD wasn't new, but adult ADHD was just being talked about.
Right.
Right.
Well, I knew what ADHD was because I remember the hyperactive little boys in school who they were the Ritalin kids.
Yeah.
But, again, we didn't think it was something that existed in girls. And so I don't want to keep going into my story, but I definitely had someone my ex-husband bring it up. I'm like, I don't have it. Like that's the boy. That's not me. So,
Exactly.
right.
And I think I'm ahead of you probably because you're Gen X. I heard you say on another podcast.
Yes.
So I'm a boomer.
Born in 70.
Okay. So, I got you beat by 11 years. I think those 11 years make a difference because I don't remember the term ADHD. I remember kids being called hyperactive. Right.
My mother said I was hyperkinetic.
Okay. So you moved a lot.
I don't think so, but she for my very sedentary mother who coincidentally had ADHD, and that's why it took me so long to realize she had it, because we move about the world very differently because inattentive and hyperactive looks very different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So if you're the daydreamy type, like I have a sibling who's the daydreaming type, I'm a little more, not quite hyperactive, but I'm active.
Are you combined?
I would imagine I'm combined. When I was diagnosed, they hadn't had those differentiations yet, but based on my own study of it, I would classify myself as mixed. I do think, and it is something that actually Ned Hallowell talks a lot about, I do think because I was active as a kid, because I was dancing from age 7 into my 30s, I think that helped also moderate my ADHD as well. And I did well in school anyway. Do you know what I mean? I was one of those kids that, you talked about this also on another podcast. I was a gifted, quote unquote, kid.
Yeah, so twice exceptional. It's actually very common. I didn't know when my oldest was diagnosed. They were first diagnosed as gifted. And then someone said, are they twice exceptional? I'm like, no, they've been reading since 3. Again, I didn't have that knowledge, which is one of the reasons we're here now. Right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So that's how I kind of got away with school. I wasn't very disciplined about studying and, getting papers done and things like that. But I could pick things up quickly, right? And obviously I would wait till the last minute to do my schoolwork. And this is the question I always ask when I'm doing an evaluation of somebody in my therapy practice. I'll ask, tell me what your room looked like when you were a kid. And if they say, oh, it was messy, I always got yelled at by my mom, clean up your room. Or my room was neat, but that's because my mom made sure to clean up my room or just stayed on top of me to clean up my room, but in like an intensive way.
I love that is the question that you ask, because I've never heard. That's one of my favorite things about doing this podcast is I always pick up something that I didn't know. I was always in trouble for my room. And I am now the best internet that I have in my house is in my 16-year-old daughter's room, who was actually just diagnosed with ADHD weeks ago. And I didn't see it coming with her. I saw it with my oldest once I learned. And her room doesn't look nearly as bad as mine or my oldest child's did, but not like my OCD child. I'll say that. So that's a great question.
Yeah. And I'll be talking a little later, hopefully if we get time for it, about therapy for ADHD. And one of the things that we work with is shame from having ADHD through the lifespan. And when I was in summer camp, they had like these goofy awards at the end of camp. I got the Pig Pen Award for having the messiest spunk, which obviously would never happen now in the 21st century. But in 1971, that would be okay, Yeah. And ADHD, man.
I didn't realize that we struggle with, a lot of people with ADHD struggle with hygiene as well. So
Yeah.
because we don't like to be bored and we don't think about things. And I even remember when I would forget to eat some days. I was pregnant with my first child. And if I was involved in something, I didn't think about it. And then my ex-husband would be like, you like, this isn't working. And this, again, before I knew that I had ADHD.
Right. That would
Wow.
make sense because the hormonal changes might have affected your executive functioning, no? To an
Well,
extent.
actually, they say you're doing your best during pregnancy because the estrogen levels are high.
I
But
see.
what happens is when you have ADHD is if you're hyper focused on something, everything else falls away, which could
Yeah.
be I'm not recognizing hunger signals or those kind of things. But I
Mm.
love the fact that you are a therapist with ADHD, and we're going to jump around because I love to do that. So I would love to know that what happens when you have a patient that comes into your office. Well, first of all, do they come to you oftentimes knowing that they have ADHD, or are they coming to you because my life is not working the way I want it to be? I'm going to seek therapy, and then you see ADHD.
Right now, it leans towards people that have been, especially recently, diagnosed with ADHD. However, prior to starting my private practice, which I started a year ago, I worked in public health for 10 years. And I was seeing like a lot of clients that would be referred to me from their primary care doctors. And a lot of those folks did not realize that they had ADHD, and I would screen and work closely with our psychiatrists and prescribers for medication. And it can be just life-changing for an adult to realize that, wow, that's why this is happening, and then to get treated and get back on track in their life. It's pretty amazing to see. So it's a balance. Right now, I'm on CHAD and ADDA.org and other referral sites specifically for ADHD. So I do get folks that either are recently diagnosed or oftentimes that it's affecting their relationship.
Sure. So when we come back, I'm going to leave you with a question, and I want to take a pause. So my mother, I just had gotten back from the ADHD conference. My mother-in-law, who is also a boomer, and I were discussing ADHD, and she says to me, well, why does it even matter? Like, why do I even need to know? Because I've sort of teased her with, I think there may be some ADHD traits. And so when we come back, I want to explore that conversation with you, which is, you're seeing older adults. And by the way, I'm defining older at this point as over 50 for many reasons, but, because we really are largely ignored in that conversation. Really empty nesters when, we're starting to slow down a little bit. Maybe we don't have the young children anymore, and we're looking at more of an open palette of our lives. And, what do we do from here? And since I am turning 55 next month, it just seems like a good age to sort of define it as. So when we come back, I want to talk to you more about, what you're seeing and why it matters. So we're going to take a pause and come back. If you are listening to this podcast, there's a good chance you or a loved one is feeling overwhelmed by the challenges of ADHD or disorganization. Since those of us with ADHD tend to struggle with where to begin big projects like moving or home organizing, the Silver Linings Transitions team can guide you through the process, breaking tasks down into manageable steps or handling every detail. There's a reason our team carries magic wands when we work with our clients. We can pack and move your entire home, and you won't have to miss a day of work or touch a single box. We also provide home organizing and storage short-outs with an understanding of ADHD. If you have a home to sell, we can provide you free or discounted services when we refer you to one of our realtor partners through our realtor referral program. Visit our website at www.silverliningstransitions.com or call us at 760-522-1624 to learn more about how we can help you make your move or home organizational project magical. We are back with Judith Rosen, licensed clinical social worker and boomer with ADHD. So she is the perfect guest to have on our episode today. So when we left, I said that I wanted to hear more about why it matters, why somebody who is a boomer or a silent generation, or even the greatest era, the greatest generation, why would it matter for them to know that they have ADHD? And what do you do with them when you are seeing them as a patient?
I think there's two things to look at, you know. Number one, this is something I do across the board with all newly diagnosed adult clients, is to really, as I mentioned earlier with the story about the Pigpen Award, is to really look at shame throughout your life, having had ADHD throughout your life. That would include, why am I not good enough? Why can't I do the same thing that other people do? Why can't I, be a super mom, right? Why can't I achieve higher in my career? Why do I forget people's birthdays and get blamed for those things? So all that shame that you've carried throughout your life, when you have the diagnosis, you have an explanation for why that is. You are not neurotypical, right? So you start to working through that shame and understanding yourself better, and a certain amount of self-forgiveness and self-compassion. The other thing is that what we know, I mean, the research is very clear on this, that as you age, the most important thing that you can do is keep physically and intellectually active. I have an uncle, my uncle Ben, who just turned 101 and very, very lucid. And I asked him, okay, Uncle Ben, what's your secret? And he said, keep moving. Right? So we do want to make sure that after age 50, we keep moving, we keep active, we keep doing things. And if you do learn that you have ADHD, then you learn the strategies for scheduling, right? For following through with projects, for trying new things, all of that stuff. It's once you have the diagnosis, then you know that you need to learn strategies to cope with it. And
So
go
ahead.
Well, I wanted to mention that, sometimes people get confused over what a coach does and what a therapist does. So like therapists can help with coaching on strategies, but coaching is mainly focused on the strategies, right? And what we do in therapy is focus on relieving that guilt, that shame, that way that having ADHD has affected you through your life. And whatever beliefs you've developed about yourself that holds you back. And I think it's really clear in this particular situation how therapy can be helpful. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And, and I've said this, that none of us who have ADHD chose it or caused it. We were born, and this is the lot that we were dealt. And one of the positive traits that I think that we have as people with ADHD is we tend to be really resilient, and we tend to be oftentimes, and I don't want to like gloss it over, but because we're more optimistic, we kind of roll with the punches a little bit better. And some people would say this was a punch. And what I've really been when I advocate and speak about ADHD is you need to give yourself some credit, because especially people who went through school without knowing, we had to devise coping strategies. For those of us who graduated from high school or graduated from college, when we were taking classes that bored us, we figured out how to get through when, to your point, we don't have the typical brains. And I know for me, I would cause chaos in my life. Like I would wait until the last minute to turn an assignment in, because I needed that dopamine hit for me to be able to be excited enough to complete the project, but it got done, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I would love to know what strategies you recommend to your clients, patients. You work as a therapist. So do you say patients, clients?
I say clients now, but I slip because I worked in a health center for so long where it was patients.
Okay.
But in my current role, it's clients. Yeah.
So what are some strategies?
Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, if there's a workbook that I work with for folks that have ADHD and anxiety by Russell Ramsey that just came out last year, that is fantastic. The Anxiety and ADHD workbook. And one of the things that I really liked about that he talks about is this idea that how we approach procrastination. We tend to think, why am I not in the mood to clean my house? Why am I not in the mood to, make these phone calls I have to make or fill out this form I have to fill out? Why can't I get myself in the mood? And to me, it was a revelation with this idea that you don't have to be in the mood. If you notice that ugh feeling, there's ways to kind of acknowledge that and look for what the pivot points are. What is it that I need to do that can move me forward to doing this thing instead of waiting until I'm in the mood to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And
So
that was
like the
kind of a revelation for me, huh? I'm
Sure.
sorry.
So like the Pomodoro method or something that's like,
Pomodoro
I'm just
method
going
is
to start.
fantastic. Yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah. Just going to start.
Pomodoro method is great.
I love gamifying. I love that they gamified the ADHD conference
Yes.
I love, give me a contest and, or I told my boyfriend this morning, like, let's plan to have people over. My house will get clean.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really
Yeah.
great, look for whatever that motivator is. There's also some great apps that I recommend. There's this wonderful new app I've been using called Finch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's similar. I forget, there was another one they talked about in our conference where it's a tree that you grow, but this is a little bird. And it's so fun. You have different goals that you do. It gets you into good routines. And it's just fun. You get stars for everything you complete. It's really cute. So I don't know if you edit this afterwards and can show it on the screen, but it's called Finch.
We will put show notes in. So we will make sure that we put a link to that.
So that's been helpful with clients as well. And one of the other things that I think is really important is to give yourself credit for the things that you did do. So, a lot of times we talk about a to-do list, but I like people to do a to-done list. And this is helpful also for depression. This is the behavioral activation in depression, is to really pat yourself on the back and give yourself credit if you brushed your teeth, if you made your bed, whatever it is, just give yourself the credit because you do get a little tiny dose of dopamine for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I will write things down that I've already done.
Yeah.
Just so that I can check them off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess it's the same thing. And I, to your point about the editing the show, I did make a conscious decision not to, because I know for me, I really firmly believe we can get caught up in perfectionism. And I knew that if I had to find somebody to edit the podcast so two things. Number one, I'm not showing up authentically. And I think that because when we have ADHD, sometimes we blurt things out or we don't think before we act. And so I very much wanted this podcast to just really exemplify what it is like to live with ADHD. But also I knew that it would be, and I'm learning, like, the one more thing sometimes will be all it takes to shut me down. And I just wanted to just keep moving forward. This podcast was delayed so long trying to get it done and perfect that I'm like, no more delay. I'm going to put the content out there because I believe it needs to be heard. And, my intention is that I'm going to continue to improve. But every single time I interview somebody, just like this one, I learn something that I didn't know that I can then share. And I sort of become a depository.
Absolutely. I've got one more thing.
Please.
Regarding the pivot point, if there's something that you have trouble getting yourself doing, trying to identify what it is when that shift comes from not doing to doing. Okay. So I realized two things for myself. And again, as a therapist with ADHD, I do a lot of experimenting on myself and a lot of analyzing on myself so that I can help my clients with, what their needs are. So I realized two things. I get up, I don't want to work out. I absolutely don't want to work out. I do have a trainer that I've scheduled workouts with that I pay for, which that helps too, But I realized that once I put on my exercise clothes, I'm ready to work out. So I tell myself, okay, just get out of bed and put your exercise clothes on. And then I'm ready. And it's the same with doing the laundry. I can delay and delay and delay doing the laundry. But I noticed that once I move the laundry bag to the door, I live in a New York City apartment, so there's no, I have to go downstairs to do it. But once I put it by the door, I'm ready to do it. So instead of thinking, oh, I got to get myself in the mood to work out. Oh, I got to get myself in the mood to do the laundry. No, I've got to move the laundry bag to the door. I've got to put my workout clothes on. And it's like magic. It works. The other thing is to understand the things that you delay and see if you're overestimating how long it takes to do. So I habit stack, which you may have talked about before. And I was
We
trying to
haven't.
get
So
in.
go ahead and mention what that is.
Habit stacking is when there's one thing that you know you always do.
Like
Like for me,
brushing
I
your teeth.
cannot go to sleep unless I brush my teeth before I go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Can't. Just
Mm-hmm.
won't happen.
Me too.
So I add other things I want to do on top of that. So before I brush my teeth, now I'm going to start, I don't know, meditating before bed, whatever it is. You keep adding to that time that you've already set aside to do something. You add one more and then one more and then one more thing to it. Then you have a nighttime routine.
Mm-hmm.
So why am I always delaying cleaning up the kitchen? Which for me is I'm one person. I have a dishwasher. Like it should, but to me it was like, oh my God, I dread doing this. I had what Russell Ramsey calls the ugh factor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know what, let me put on a timer or stopwatch essentially, see how long it takes to actually do this thing I'm dreading. Cause we have the time blindness.
Mm-hmm.
And when I realized it really took me under 10 minutes to clean the whole kitchen before bed, it was
That's
like,
not bad.
whoa, yeah. Well,
And I found, so I remember, back right after I graduated college and I had started a career where I was sitting behind a desk all day and I gained what we called the buyer's butt. And back in those days, I loved Cosmopolitan magazine. And so I would only let myself read Cosmopolitan magazine when I was on the treadmill. So then that I would motivate to treadmill. So it could be like if you have to do the dishes, then maybe there is a book that you enjoy or a podcast like this one that you enjoy. And maybe that becomes your reward. Like I said, I love when I get to talk to somebody who's got the professional and the lived experience. I don't even have to go into it. That's awesome.
I was going to say, I'm very open about it with my clients. It's even on my website that I have ADHD because I want to normalize it.
Absolutely. That we do need to destigmatize that. And like I said in the podcast, you should be proud. Like whatever you have been able to accomplish, you did it. Sort of like there was remember Fred Astaire and I don't remember who his dance partner was.
Ginger Rogers.
Yes. And then they said something like she did everything he did, but only in heels and going backwards.
Yep.
Right. And that's sort of what ADHD is. We are in heels going backwards and we are navigating life. And I always love meeting people with ADHD and especially bringing them onto the podcast so that you see, hey, I've never met a person with ADHD that I didn't think was so awesome. And that makes me feel better. Like I'm not judging you or I'm actually cheering you on, go you.
Well,
and I think, go ahead.
See how we're interrupting each other. We're so ADHD.
Oh, yeah. That's so typical of these podcasts.
Yes. I am very fascinated with evolutionary psychology. And the way I look at it is we are the hunter-gatherers in an agricultural world. Mm-hmm. Right. We are not neurotypical, but that doesn't mean, that's why I use the word because it's in there, but I don't really like the word disorder in ADHD. I prefer different. But what I will tell a newly diagnosed client, as I'll explain, originally we were great until they came up with this dumb agriculture stuff. And with an ADHD brain, if your house is burning down, you want to call one of us.
Right.
If you want your taxes done, call somebody else.
Well, unless that seems to be the thing that you like to focus on. But, that's 100%. Something as an entrepreneur, in the entrepreneur space, you have the innovator, the person that's coming up with ideas and the visionary, and then you have the integrator, the person that is executing. And we need both. I mean, we really do need both. Just like, we need somebody who's going to take out the garbage, who is going to, we all have roles. And I really believe I'm very spiritual. And I really believe that we are here with the talents that we were given because we have something to do with those talents. And, none of us chose ADHD, but here we are. And I really like Ned Hallowell's, rather than calling it ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, variable attention stimulus trait, because that is so true. Because I'm not hyperactive or distracted if I am fascinated or interested in a topic.
Yep. 100%. So, he's one of my heroes.
Yeah, he's amazing. I want him on the podcast eventually. I'm going to keep knocking on that door till he says yes. So I try to keep the shows around a half an hour because I know our attention is, but I want to make sure that, first of all, that anybody who wants to find you can. So I want to make sure that you share who you work with and how they can find you. And also, of course, any parting words of wisdom you want to leave for our guests.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's just been a pleasure talking to you today, Jamie. I'm glad I sat next to you at the
Me
conference.
too.
Yes, they can find me at juditheverosen.com. That's my website. Also, I am on Psychology Today. I do treat folks with ADHD. And it's not that I just treat ADHD, but I treat folks with ADHD who may have other issues because I have that framework of understanding what it's like to have ADHD. So if you're coming to me because you're having relationship issues, I know about ADHD and how that might be impacting it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're coming for
Sure.
anxiety or for depression, I know how ADHD impacts that as well.
Right. And I know, I was going to say, interrupting you again, I know that social anxiety is actually one of the biggest comorbidities with
Yep,
ADHD. And I, wanted
absolutely.
to make sure. And anxiety, and like we could do a whole episode, probably will, on anxiety and ADHD. But
Call
okay,
me back for that one. I'll be
okay,
happy.
okay.
So
Then
I am a Beck Institute certified clinician, which is CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. That is the gold standard therapy for anxiety. So I do treat anxiety and depression without ADHD. We don't have time to really get into it, but I also have a veterinary social work certification and I do pet bereavement work. So it's a fascinating field. I help people with that. Being in New York, being a former dancer, as I mentioned earlier, I have a special focus for folks who are in the creative arts field. It's an LGBTQ friendly practice as well. It's all virtual. And I see folks in New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York virtually. I'm licensed in those 3 states.
That's great. So,
So,
any parting words that
yes.
you want to make sure, and I am going to have you back. We definitely need to talk about anxiety and ADHD.
Oh, yeah.
So, any parting words? Maybe like one thing I always like to ask is, what's your favorite ADHD trait?
Oh, yeah. My favorite ADHD trait is we are like the most fun friend you're ever going to have. If you have a friend with ADHD, they might show up late, they might forget your birthday, but damn, we're so much fun. And we're a great problem. I think thinking outside the box, being a good problem solver, being interested in everything. I don't think I would not want to have ADHD.
I
You
feel
know
the
what I
same
mean?
way. Yeah,
Yeah,
I feel the same
I
way.
love that I have it, and I love that I know how to treat it. But the parting thing, the main thing, given the focus of your podcast, is that I wanted to share that no matter what age you receive the diagnosis, and no matter what has happened prior to that, with the diagnosis, it can be life changing. And with the proper treatment, you can reach goals that you haven't been able to reach up to this point. Right. For me, I had 23 credits when I went back to school. And, I had had a successful career in IT up to then, but, a lot of struggles to get there. And I graduated summa cum laude with a 4.0 and my master's a 4.0 without the stress that I would have had. I don't even know if I would have been able to complete prior to being treated for ADHD. And I think that treatment was very helpful for me. So I think it's important that if you are diagnosed as a grandma, that means that things that you haven't been able to do in the past, you may be able to do now. And don't be afraid of taking chances and trying new things and exploring things that you may have been held back from because of ADHD, undiagnosed.
That's great. I love it. This really was a great interview, Judith. I absolutely want to have you back, and I so appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure. And thanks for everything that you are doing. It's much
That
appreciated.
it is my pleasure, and also my current dinosaur. You know how we people with ADHD tend to hyperfixate on something, and once we are interested in it, we just want to learn everything that we can. And I jokingly say that ADHD has become my dinosaur. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today. I hope you will join me in the next episode. And whatever you are doing today, don't forget to talk kindly to yourself. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The hosts, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.